Morning, I'm Jess, on the way to work. Fossey Taylor, a group of companies that make investing in property easy for clients who haven't got the time, skill or inclination. So I've got a question today. It's from a number of people actually, but the main one from Mary, and there are 3 or 4 other people all asking roughly the same question. It's all about rentals and tenants, and Mary's question was, what is the worst tenant you've ever had? And well, I'll answer that. I suppose packaging all the other questions that I've got there together, I can see 2 threads running through all of them. It's the 2 things that all new or prospective landlords fear the most, and it's tenants not paying the rent, voids, or a tenant trashing the house. I say new landlords because as you get a bit more experience and you get into it, you realise that the reality is a lot different. It shouldn't be like that for most people. Answering the question directly then, what's the worst tenant? Has a tenant ever not paid the rent? Have I had big voids or trashed the property? The answer is yes for me. In the past, never anymore. And I think if I share with you now what the difference is, you'll see how to avoid my mistakes. So in the past, the very first houses that I ever bought, I rented them myself. I've always, in a way, now I own a letting agency. So do I still rent out my own properties? I suppose in a way I do, yeah. But those days I had a flag board made, one of those things that says to let, goes outside the property. It actually still said Butterfield Taylor, like our ones do today, but it wasn't really an agency. Butterfield's my mother's maiden name, and I just needed a name on there, my mobile phone number, so they could call me. They called me up, and I didn't have to be the landlord. I could be a letting agency at that point, but that's as far as it went. I met a tenant on site. I sort of eyeball them. If I'd have talked to you about this, 15 years ago, I'd have thought I'd have been doing a good job. I could have listed all the things that I did as part of my due diligence to make sure I got what I thought was a good tenant. I'd meet them, I'd get a feel for them. I don't know what on earth that means. I don't know. I think you can get a feel for if they're wrong, but plenty of people interview well, so it's not really the most reliable test. I checked they had some money, and they liked the house. I used to live 20 minutes away from my houses. I didn't want to visit them all the time, so that was it. They had the money. I usually, if I didn't have the money, we'd go off to a cash put machine. I'd do the paperwork really well. I got an AST from WH Smith's or whatever, and fill it all in and give them the keys, and off they go. Back in the days of no holding deposits having to be registered or anything like that. So, really simple, and off they go. I would give them a form on how to set up a standing order. Please, can you do that? Leave them with it, and off they go. And that was it. Every week I'd check the bank, make sure money had gone in there. Maybe I might forget one week, or I was on holiday or something, but at least every 2 weeks, maybe every 3, because sometimes I forgot as well, I was busy or whatever. So I've got a list of people who haven't paid me, and I go around and knock on doors or phone them. Their phone wasn't on or didn't work, and I couldn't get hold of somebody, and well, before you knew it, 6, 7, 8 weeks had gone by, and I still haven't managed to get hold of this person and talk to them about the rent they hadn't paid, or maybe I had, and maybe they paid a little bit. I was busy running another business and also buying more houses, so one thing leads to another, and gradually I get large arrears. Every now and again I go into a property and find out that they're gone, or the place was in a mess, or whatever. What's the difference now? One thing, I employed some professionals to do it. At the point when I employed a letting agency, and actually there was a point when I stopped doing this altogether myself, and I employed a letting agency for a section of my portfolio in a different town. I noticed how they did things a lot differently. They probably weren't the best letting agency, but I learned a few things from them. And then when we opened up our proper letting agency, and I employed people with, now in the office we've got 7 people there renting, collecting rents, managing things, doing the maintenance, all the stuff that you need to do. They're all professionals. If you put all their years of experience together, it's nearly half a decade of experience in lettings, hour of training and all those things. It took, when I handed over my full portfolio to our lettings manager, the guy that I now employ, it took him nearly 2 years to clear up my mess. And it was a bit of an eye-opener, actually, seeing exactly what it was. And it made me a little bit uncomfortable, because some of the things I remember right at the beginning I didn't agree with. It used to take a lot longer to rent. I remember thinking at the point when we are trying to rent this house out, I mean, I could rent a house out in a day. Why can't you rent a house out in a day? You're taking like a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Sometimes we'd wait 2 weeks, we'd have a tenant, and then we said no to them because they failed this thing called referencing, and they had to go and we had to start all over again. So sometimes it could take 6 weeks to rent a house, and it had never taken me 6 weeks to rent a house, ever. Like, never had it taken me there. And at that point I'm thinking, is this new regime of lettings, is it worth it? Is it working? Is it good? Who is this guy who thinks he knows what he's doing? He's got a lot of experience, but what does he know? Of course, now I can tell you that renting out to tenants in the right way, I can list it, 5-6 points. I'll give you them in a minute, but it's not rocket science. It's exactly what you'd expect. Get a reference, get a guarantor. Every single person that rents one of our houses has to earn at least £18,000 a year. If they don't, they need a guarantor that takes £23,000 a year. I mean, they're today's figures. It'll go up and down depending when you're watching this video. Make sure that you've got a dedicated bank account and somebody checks it every day. If they don't pay their rent, if the tenant doesn't pay their rent, call them that day, send them a letter that day, do the same tomorrow and the next day. By the second day, you're knocking on the door the third day. You've sent them a letter, quite a snotty one, by the 7th day. The first one was, you might have forgotten, please be in touch. The 7th day one is not quite so nice, and the 14th day one is essentially a threatening action, eviction, if they don't comply. Do inspections. Sounds really simple, but be bothered to go around and check, and do them more often at the beginning of the tenancy. I mean, people say do a 6-month tenancy, do 6-month inspection. If in the first couple of weeks, you'll always find an excuse to go around in the first month or so of a tenancy. Good, do that, see how they're living. If the tenant isn't paying their rent, do more inspections. Just be present, be front of mind for these people. I always say that if somebody is renting a house and they're not paying you the rent, they're choosing to pay somebody else before you. They've got enough money to pay the rent for sure. They don't just bring, let's say we're renting a house out for £600 a month. They haven't just got £600 to spend. But if they're not paying you, they're paying other people before, themselves, council tax, gas, electric. I mean, you probably wouldn't want them to skimp on those things, because at that point you're going to get them into financial trouble, and that will be a problem that comes to bite you 6 months down the line when they're in real financial difficulty. But if they're paying Christmas presents, holidays, Sky TV, fags, those things before you, that is a problem, and you need to have that conversation, and we'll be that up front. We know you make more than £600 a month, you rent £600 a month. Who are you paying before us? That's a question you can ask. When you knock on the door, you've got to have something to say, and that's one of the little scripts we run. So the next thing is have tight paperwork if it does come to it. So tenants not paying voids trashing the place. Doesn't happen very often. As an indicator of that, by the way, as long as you've got everybody referenced and signed up correctly, we can usually put in a rent and legal cover and an insurance policy, basically, for less than £100 for 12 months. And if anybody knows much about insurance, if the premium is £100, but the overall rent and legal, I think the rent and legal goes up to over £50,000. That's not a big premium, so it gives you an indication of how often this happens, and it just doesn't happen very often. The next thing is have tight paperwork. I mean, my AST, assured short hold tenancy, my tenancy agreement that I had from WH Smith that I got people to sign, it's better than nothing, but these days it's so heavily regulated and tight. You've got to have a professional there that knows what they're talking about, has the right paperwork set, and more than just a contract. The contract has to be correct, but it has to have everything in there, so that if and when you need to go further to an eviction or whatever, you've done everything so correctly that if you're ever sat in front of a judge, and I've been sat in front of a few, they aren't going to have any qualms. They can't say, well, hang on a minute, this clause here is incorrect, therefore I'm going to side with the tenant and the tenant stays. We've got a paperwork set that is the half of it that we normally use, and it sits there. It dovetails perfectly with the other half that we hope we never have to use, which is the eviction paperwork set, all the notices and everything to get people out, all written by the same solicitor. Therefore, if we have a problem with this one particular tenant, the first stage is get that solicitor to write us the standard letter, 50 quid, out it goes. Usually that does the trick. If it doesn't, then it's the first stage in a process that clicks in, and it just goes all the way through. And I know I can get a tenant carried out by a bailiff for about £1,200, which is a not insignificant cost, but it's done. It's a fixed cost. It's done, and it's done within about 6 weeks, 7-8 weeks at the absolute outside. So I can put a finite cost. It's absolutely not the best situation, but that is as tight as I've ever seen it get, and that's how we do it. I can tell you that the number of tenants that we've evicted in the last 12 months is 2. That's it. So, and one of those we did have to carry out, and the other one we didn't. So that's just over 1,000 tenancies. So that's how often it happens. Not very often. The key to it is be organised with the paperwork set. I've seen people flounder in that situation, and you know, the cost to us £1,200 and 1-2 months rent, versus 6 months rent and a £5,000 legal bill. That's the difference. So have a really tight paperwork set and a legal team you can trust, and really importantly, don't hesitate to instruct them. I've seen even our landlords saying, if I serve notice on these people, they're definitely not going to pay the rent, and they might trash the place. Whereas at the moment, if I hold on, maybe they will pay the rent. 9 times out of 10 they won't, and you just need to nip it in the bud, get on with it, plough through, and be happy that in 8 weeks' time you'll be the other side. And renting is a very profitable business. It will cover that, no problem at all. So especially if you've got the rental legal cover, if it's something that you're thinking, maybe I couldn't, maybe this is my first, second, third, fourth house, and I couldn't afford that £2,000 out of my monthly cash flow there, get rent and legal cover. If you feel like that, never be in the situation where you're having to say, do you know what, I can't quite afford to evict this non-paying a tenant. That's probably quite an important piece as well. So there you are, there's my top tips. What's the worst tenant I've had? There's been dozens. They're all in the past. Right now, the way to get around it, the way to overcome that, is employ professionals. It's really simple. It's not a cheap and cheerful letting agent. It's not doing it yourself. It's not your mate. It's not somebody you find in the back street that'll do it for 5%. It's not just going around and collecting the rent. It's a bit more than that. You need somebody who really knows what they're doing. Honestly, it's probably not a big corporate, because I've never gone to a big corporate and found that level of service, that level of commitment. We employ people from big corporates, and one of their mantras is, it's a leaky bucket. Landlords will come and go. We've got 10,000 of them. If we lose 200 a month, the trick is to put 300 in there. And I know that's kind of their company policies in a lot of those big corporate letting agencies. Not ideal, but I know it is. You need a letting agent who is going to treat the property like you would yourself, but with an extra care of diligence, because they're professionals and they know what they're doing. and they have the time to do it, because best will in the world, you want to treat it like that, but you haven't got time to check the bank account, you haven't got time to send that letter out, and you haven't got time to go knock on the door if that's what it takes. You haven't got time to do the inspections, and if you do go there to do the inspection, you probably feel a bit awkward because you don't quite know what to do. You know, we've got a nice big script and a list of things to do, and it's what we do all day, every day, and we're professionals. So get in touch. Come and see one of our discovery days if you want to hear a bit more, if that sort of piques your interest into what a good letting agency looks like, how they look after your properties. Come and see us on one of our discovery days. It's a day where we answer all your questions, bring along as many as you like, and by the end of it we should have answered all of them. There'll be 17 property professionals in the room. That's how many people work in my office, and all day we buy houses, we renovate houses, we rent houses, and then we manage and maintain them over the long period. We build customer relationships that last 20, 30, 40 years. We are in the long-term investment business. Send us any more questions you have, and get in touch. Hopefully I'll meet you soon. Thanks for watching.